The sound of laughter ricocheted off the walls, but it felt like I wasn't even part of the scene. Dad's voice, cold, sharp, dismissive, cut straight through the noise. "You are nothing. Stop pretending you matter," he said, not even caring enough to look in my direction. My brother, always ready to join in and twist the blade deeper, snorted and added, "Honestly, we forget you're part of the family most of the time." My grip tightened around my fork, the smooth metal digging painfully into my skin. I looked around the table at faces I had known my entire life, faces I could recognize in a crowd, faces that never really saw me, not once. I had always suspected a moment like this would eventually come. I just didn't expect the blow to land this hard. Heat burned up my chest, and the familiar sting gathered behind my eyes. That sting always came right before the tears they loved calling dramatic or oversensitive. But tonight, they weren't going to witness that. Tonight, I wasn't going to be the small, eager-to-please girl they had trained me to be. I lifted my fork and tapped it gently against my glass. The clear, ringing sound sliced through the room, silencing the laughter and pulling every pair of eyes toward me. I rose slowly, my heart hammering so loudly it almost drowned out the hushed whispers. "This won't take long," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, steadier than they expected. "Just 3 sentences." I paused deliberately, letting the moment stretch. The smirks gradually faded, replaced with confusion. Good. Let them wonder. Let them sit with even a drop of the discomfort they had poured over me for years. I wasn't the timid girl desperate for scraps of affection anymore. As I stood there, a flood of memories surged forward, memories that hit like needles. Every forgotten birthday, every celebration where my name wasn't even mentioned, every moment I achieved something only to watch them shrug like it was nothing. I remembered being 10 years old, clutching a handmade card, waiting by the window for a father who promised he would come home early. He never showed up. That little piece of me that kept hoping they'd change, hoping they'd love me the way I loved them, had been dying slowly for years. Tonight, I was finally letting it rest. Their eyes were locked onto me now, some irritated, some confused, none of them understanding what was coming. I had carried the weight of their rejection for so long it had reshaped me, forged me into someone stronger than they could recognize. Tonight wasn't about an explosive confrontation, not the kind they'd expect. It was about truth. Quiet, sharp, clean truth. It was about taking back the pieces of myself they had chipped away slowly. My fingers trembled slightly around the fork, but my voice did not waver. 3 sentences. That was all I needed. I inhaled slowly, feeling years of hurt swirl with something new. Freedom. I swept my eyes across the room, taking in their stiffened faces, the sudden hush, the way my mother's wineglass froze midair. For a second, I wished I could freeze time, just to keep this moment, the first time they realized I wasn't the invisible shadow they preferred me to be. My first sentence was gentle, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. "I have loved this family with every part of me that you all decided wasn't worth anything." The words dropped into the room like stones in water. Ripples of shock spread across their expressions. Dad shifted in his seat, his brows drawing together like he was trying to figure out how to turn my words into a joke. But there was nothing to laugh at. Not tonight. I wasn't the joke anymore. I waited, letting the silence stretch before I delivered the second sentence, the one sharper than any insult I could have thrown. "And after tonight, you will never have to pretend I matter to you ever again." My mother's face drained of color instantly. My brother's jaw hung open slightly before he shut it again, as if his brain had lost its usual supply of snide comments. For the first time in my life, I saw something flicker in their eyes that had never been there before. Fear. Not because I yelled, not because I broke something, but because they finally sensed they had lost something they didn't even bother to value. A strange, peaceful warmth settled over me. No anger, no sadness, just acceptance. Clean and quiet. like stepping into fresh air after months of suffocating inside a locked room. I could have said so much more. God knows I rehearsed speeches in the mirror for years, words I never got the courage to say. But I didn't owe them all that pain. I didn't owe them anything anymore. I set my fork down beside my plate with slow precision and gave a small, polite smile. Not fake, not forced, just free. Without waiting for a reaction, without giving them a chance to twist my words, I turned and began walking away from the table. I didn't look back. Not when Mom called my name, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not when Dad slammed his palm against the table so hard the silverware clattered. Not when my brother muttered something under his breath. I kept walking, each step lighter than the one before. At the doorway, I paused long enough to deliver the final sentence, the one that sealed everything with a soft final note of closure. Take care of yourselves, because you won't ever get another chance to take care of me. The door clicked shut behind me, and I knew, deep in my bones, that for the first time ever, I had chosen myself. The night air rushed against my skin like a blessing, cool, crisp, alive. I stood on the porch for a long moment, letting the muffled sounds from inside blur into nothingness. Funny how a house could be full of voices, laughter, noise, and still feel hollow. I didn't have a plan. I didn't need one. All I knew was that I couldn't keep playing the role they cast me in. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their forgotten daughter. I was something bigger, something they no longer had the privilege to know. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't even need to check. It was them. Maybe Mom with her empty apologies, or my brother pretending it was a misunderstanding, or Dad demanding I stop being dramatic. I slid the phone into airplane mode and tucked it deeper into my coat. Silence. Real silence. For the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt powerful. I walked down the porch steps slowly, gravel crunching under my shoes. I remembered being a child, running down this same driveway with scraped knees, chasing after my brother, even when he teased me, even when he ignored me. Back then, fitting in, even badly, felt like a victory. What a small life that had been. At my car, I unlocked the door and stood there with it open, breathing in the night, letting years of buried expectations fall away one by one. I thought of my college graduation, the sea of faces, none of them belonging to my family. I thought of every milestone they downplayed, every birthday they forgot, every moment I achieved something, only to watch them shrug like it was nothing. All those years I pretended it didn't matter. All those years I begged for a place at a table that was never set for me. A soft, relieved laugh escaped me. Clean, relieved. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and watched the house shrink in the mirror. No tears, no regrets, just an open road and a heart that finally belonged to itself. Tonight wasn't an ending. It was the beginning. And deep down, I knew they would remember this night forever. The night they realized the one person they thought would always crawl back never did. Days slipped into weeks. Weeks softened into a strange, aching quiet. I kept expecting some old instinct to pull me back toward them, some leftover sense of duty or habit. But nothing came. No urge, no guilt, just peace. They didn't call. I didn't reach out. The silence between us grew into something solid, something final. At first, it hurt, not because I needed them, but because I mourned the idea of what they should have been. The fantasy family I used to pretend I had. But I filled my days with small joys, with work, with rebuilding the parts of myself I had never had the chance to explore. And slowly, I realized how much lighter life felt without their constant disappointment pressing down on me. How much easier it was to breathe when I wasn't constantly shrinking myself. Some nights, I scrolled through old family photos, holidays, birthdays, random afternoons. I could see it clearly now. I was always a little off to the side, always slightly out of place, always the one leaning in rather than being welcomed in. I had convinced myself for years that it was normal. It never was. One night, sipping tea by my window, watching the city lights, I let the memories come without excuses. The birthday my brother got a car, while I got a card. The Christmas where my gifts were an afterthought. The graduation where I searched the crowd and found only empty seats. For the first time, I understood the truth without flinching. I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't forgettable. I just invested my heart in people who could never return the love I gave. Realizing that felt like finally stepping out of a fog into sunlight. And one evening, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I found a document I had completely forgotten existed, a letter I had written to my family a year ago but never sent. It was raw and angry, filled with accusations and heartbreak. I read it now with a strange, detached curiosity. The person who had written that letter was still inside me, but she wasn't running the show anymore. I didn't need them to hear my side. I didn't need them to apologize or to understand or to change. Their silence was answer enough. Still, a part of me wanted closure, a final act, not for them but for myself, a way to mark the end of this chapter properly, quietly, dignified. I thought back to that dinner, the one where my father had sneered at me, where my brother's laughter had stung sharper than any slap. I remembered how they had stared, confused, and amused when I tapped my fork against the glass and asked for a moment of attention. I had said I needed just 3 sentences. They had only heard 2. It was time for the third. The next morning, I woke up to a sky heavy with gray clouds, the kind that felt like they pressed down on you, making you move slower, think deeper. I didn't rush. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city breathe. Life went on outside, uncaring, untouchable. And for once, I felt the same way. It wasn't revenge I wanted, not the kind where you scream and slam doors and demand apologies. It was something quieter, a line drawn in the sand, permanent and undeniable, a way to say, without shouting, "You lost me." I opened my phone and scrolled to our old family group chat. It had been silent for months, apart from the occasional meme my brother sent that no one responded to. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but no words came. They didn't deserve words. Instead, I clicked the small Leave Group button. It asked if I was sure. I was. The second it was done, a strange calm settled over me. There was no grand fanfare, no moment of cinematic closure, just peace, a tiny, quiet liberation. But I wasn't finished yet. I found an old photo of me, one that had been taken years ago at a family barbecue. In it, I was sitting on the edge of the patio, half in shadow, half in sunlight, forgotten, barely in the frame. I had saved it not because it was a good memory, but because it reminded me of the truth. I uploaded it to my social media with a short caption. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop sitting where you were never invited to be seen. No tagging, no names, just truth floating in the open. Quiet, but unmissable. Minutes after posting, my phone started buzzing. Messages from extended relatives, aunts, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. Some asking if I was okay. Others just sending hearts or short knowing responses like, "Proud of you," or "Took me years to learn that too." Not a single message from my parents, not one from my brother. And somehow that made it even more perfect. The silence from them was more honest than any apology could have been. I spent the rest of the day doing things for myself. I took myself out to lunch, something I used to be too self-conscious to do alone. I bought a new book. I walked aimlessly through the city, letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the last lingering ghosts of their voices in my head. At one point, as the sun started to set, I found myself standing on a bridge, overlooking the river. The water moved slowly, endlessly, never looking back. Neither would I. It's strange how grief and freedom can coexist in the same breath. How you can mourn what you never had while celebrating the fact that you finally stopped chasing it. I leaned on the railing and let the wind whip through my hair, feeling lighter than I had in years. In that moment, I promised myself something. I would not let the people who had made me feel small dictate the size of my dreams anymore. I would not waste my life trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. And most of all, I would never again apologize for existing. The third sentence I had promised at that dinner wasn't for them to hear. It was for me to live. It had taken me years to realize that some families aren't built on love, but on expectation and obligation. And it had taken me even longer to understand that walking away wasn't giving up, it was choosing myself. Finally, days turned into weeks, and life moved on, beautifully indifferent to the weight I had shed. I found myself laughing more easily, sleeping more deeply. The heavy ache that had lived just beneath my ribs for years had loosened its grip, and in its place there was room to breathe, to dream, to exist without apology. I started taking small steps toward the life I had once thought was beyond me. I enrolled in classes I had long put off, ones that made my heart race with excitement. I decorated my tiny apartment with things that felt like me: warm lights, messy art, books stacked in uneven towers. My world wasn't perfect, but it was mine, finally and entirely. And yet, there were moments that the past tugged at me like a stubborn ghost. It whispered in my quieter hours. It reminded me of the girl I used to be, the one who sat quietly at family gatherings, shrinking into the corners, hoping someone would notice, with C. Sometimes I still wondered if they thought of me, if they regretted it. That answer came sooner than I expected. One rainy afternoon, as the city blurred behind streaks of water on my window, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something inside me knew. I stared at it for a long moment before answering, my voice steady. It was my mother. Her voice, once sharp and dismissive, now trembled at the edges. She danced around the reason she called, making awkward small talk like a stranger trying to find her footing in a foreign land. I listened quietly, not giving her anything to latch onto. Finally, after minutes that felt like years, she sighed. "Your father's birthday is coming up," she said. He mentioned you. We're having a little dinner. You should come." It would have been easy to think this was an olive branch, a small peace offering after years of hurt, but I wasn't naive anymore. I could hear the hollowness beneath her words, the way she phrased it like an obligation rather than a heartfelt wish. They didn't miss me. They missed the role I used to play. The quiet scapegoat, the emotional dumping ground, the invisible extra at their grand performance. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the final pieces of clarity settle into place. "I won't be able to make it," I said softly. A beat of silence. "Oh," she replied, the disappointment naked in her tone. "Maybe next time." "There won't be a next time," I said, still calm, still kind, but with a firmness that even she couldn't miss. I ended the call before she could respond. I sat there for a long while afterward, feeling the final thread snap free. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. Later that night, as the rain finally stopped and the city lit up in reflections on the wet streets, I thought about the version of me who had once begged for their love, who had twisted herself into shapes too small to be seen, too quiet to be heard. She was gone now. In her place stood someone who didn't need their validation, their approval, or their company to feel whole. I had given them everything once, my loyalty, my love, my forgiveness, and they had tossed it aside like it was nothing. Now I gave them nothing. Not anger, not hatred, just absence. And somehow that absence echoed louder than any words I could have ever spoken. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on so completely that their world keeps spinning, but without you in it. Weeks turned into months, and my absence from their lives became a presence of its own. The seat I used to occupy at family dinner stayed empty year after year. My name became something they couldn't mention without a lingering pause, a flicker of discomfort in the room. I didn't have to witness it to know it was the kind of truth that lived in the spaces people tried to fill with small talk and forced laughter. I built my own life, brick by steady brick, not out of spite, but out of love for myself. I poured energy into friendships that were real, where love was not a currency to be earned, but a language spoken freely. I found mentors who believed in me without condition, people who said, "You belong here," without a second thought. Career-wise, things blossomed in ways I had never dared to dream before. Every little victory, every promotion, every compliment, every late-night project that ended in success was a stone laid firmly in the road that led me away from them. And still the echoes came. One evening, just as I was closing my laptop after a long day, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another instinct inside me that already knew. This time, it was my brother. There was no pretense in his voice, no small talk, no false warmth. He sounded tired, not physically, but in that heavy, soul-deep way that only comes when the lies people tell themselves finally run out of air. "We were talking about you," he said, voice brittle. "It's weird not having you around. Mom, she cries sometimes." I let his words hang in the air between us. Let him sit in the discomfort he had helped build. I could hear him fidgeting with something, probably the hem of his sleeve like he used to when he was nervous as a kid. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't realize how much we were hurting you. I thought you were just dramatic." There it was, that word, the one they had weaponized against me my whole life to dismiss my feelings. Dramatic. I almost laughed, but instead, I just breathed in deeply and let go. "I'm glad you're realizing it now," I said, my voice even, "but I'm not coming back." He was silent for a long time. "Even just to visit?" he asked, like a child hoping for a miracle. "No," I said. "I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not that girl anymore either." Another silence, and then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from him, "We miss you." I didn't say it, but the truth wrapped itself around my heart like a gentle, final goodbye. You missed the idea of me. You missed the convenience of me, not the real me. I ended the call with a polite goodbye and sat there staring out my window as the city lights blinked against the dark. There was no triumph in it, no gloating, just peace. I thought about the last time I had sat at their table, surrounded by laughter that had never truly included me. I thought about my father's cruel words, my brother's dismissive tone, my mother's averted eyes. I thought about the girl who clinked her glass against her pieces and spoke 3 sentences that changed everything. And I smiled, not because they finally saw the empty space I left behind, but because, for the first time in my life, I no longer felt empty. I didn't need to punish them. Life had already punished them. Because when you teach someone that your presence is disposable, you shouldn't be surprised when they learn to walk away and never look back. And I had learned, finally, and beautifully, how to walk away without leaving a trail of anger behind me. Only silence, the loudest sound they would ever hear. Months later, on a chilly evening, I found myself sitting alone at a quiet cafe, a small place tucked away from the noisy streets, the kind of place where nobody knew my name, and that felt like a blessing. I stir my coffee slowly, watching the steam rise and fade into the air, thinking about how far I had come from the person who once begged to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. The past no longer felt like chains pulling me under. It felt distant now, like an old story someone else had lived. It wasn't anger that filled my chest. It was gratitude. Gratitude that I had been forced to save myself. Gratitude that the people who broke me also set me free. I had no desire to reach back out, no curiosity about their holidays, their dinners, their milestones.
I wished them well from a distance, so far that their hurtful words could never reach me again. One evening, I received a letter. It was from my mother. The handwriting was shaky, almost hesitant. She wrote about missing me, about regretting how they had treated me, about how time had taught her the value of things she once took for granted. She said she wished she could turn back the clock. She said she wished she had been braver, kinder, stronger. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply let it be what it was, a late apology written in a language that would never undo what had been done. Sometimes people are sorry only when they lose the version of you they took for granted. Sometimes their guilt is about their loss, not your pain. I didn't write back, not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I no longer needed to explain myself to people who had once told me I was invisible. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already proven it to the only person who ever mattered, myself. As I left the cafe that night, the cold air kissed my skin, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. Every step I took felt lighter. Every breath felt deeper. There was no grand speech, no big confrontation, no dramatic ending. Just a quiet, powerful truth. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on so completely that their world keeps spinning, but without you in it.